Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. They burst into the house without warning, without hesitation, just kicked the door in, and before I could fully process what was happening, my instincts had already taken over. I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest bastard by the wrist and twisting it so hard that the knife slipped from his grip, clattering onto the floor. But before I could seize the advantage, something heavy and brutal crashed into the back of my head, sending my mind spiraling into a hazy, pain-filled stupor. I collapsed to my knees, red flashes exploded behind my eyes, my entire body jerked from the sudden impact as a boot slammed into my chest, crushing the air from my lungs in a single, violent burst. I gasped, but the attempt to breathe ended in a dry, ragged cough. Fast, who? But not fast enough, you little shit. I felt rough hands seize me, wrench my arms behind my back, haul me up, then slam me face first into the filthy floor, pressing me down so hard that a sharp pain shot through my nose and a thick metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. What do you want? I rasped, struggling for breath, but instead of an answer, a fist smashed into my jaw. The world tilted, my vision blurred, and I barely registered the warm trickle of blood sliding down my chin. Oh, look at that. He's not even screaming. Guess we'll have to help him open up. I heard it had familiar. Sharp click of a blade snapping open, and before I could react, something cold and sharp traced my chest. A light cut, thin, almost delicate. Then another, deeper one. You think you're tough, huh? I gave him nothing. No kurai. No goron. Just a steady, unflinching stare straight ahead, refusing to blink, refusing to look away, refusing to let them see that they had any effect on me. That pissed them off. A new punch to the gut, followed by another to my ribs. The air ripped from my lungs again, pain shot through my chest, but I forced myself not to bend, not to break, not to give them what they wanted. God damn it, he's still holding out. I heard their laughter, rough, mean, laced with mockery. They hauled me up, shoved me onto a chair, wrenching my arms back and tying them down so tightly that my wrist throbbed under the pressure. You're all gonna die, I whispered, gathering the last of my breath, locking eyes with the closest one. Did you hear that? He's gonna kill us. Yeah? Big scary fucking guy. One of them leaned in, his breath stinking of booze and stale cigarettes, and before I could say anything else, he dragged his knife across my shoulder, not deep, but enough to make sure I felt every second of it. Warm blood oozed down my skin, soaking into my shirt. Come on, scream for me, asshole. I clenched my jaw, kept silent. No, that's fine. We're not in a hurry. They cut me slow, methodical, as if they wanted more than just a hurt methy wanted to savor it, to turn me into a masterpiece of bruises and wounds, a canvas of pain. But even when they split my lip open, even when the knife left a fresh, crimson trail along my ribs, even when their fists hammered into my face over and over again, I didn't give them what they wanted. I stared into their eyes, promising them hell, promising them death, promising that if I got out of this they would all pay. But even a body like mine had limits. I felt the darkness creeping in, my vision flickering, my mind dimming, pain fading into the void, and somewhere between one more punch and one more cut, I lost consciousness. I came to with a crushing weight in my skull, as if someone had shattered my head with a sledgehammer. My eyelids parted with difficulty, and the acrid stench of smoke filled my nose. Around me, crimson tongues of fire danced wildly, devouring furniture, wallpaper, and ceiling beams. The house was burning. The heat scorched my skin, my breath faltered from the fumes, and I coughed violently as my lungs filled with suffocating smoke. I tried to move, but my wrists and ankles were tied tightly to the bed frame with rough ropes. They had left me here to burn alive in this fiery trap. But I wasn't going to die. I tensed every muscle, trying to break free, but the ropes only dug deeper into my flesh. Desperate, I scanned the room. On the bedside table lay shards of a shattered mirror, likely cracked from the heat. One of the pieces was long enough, sharp enough. I began to rock back and forth, stretching toward it. The fabric of my pajamas caught a stray spark, igniting in an instant. A searing pain tore through my side, and I screamed, but the last moment my fingers clutched the glass shard. I squeezed it tight. I began sawing through the ropes. Each breath grew heavier, the smoke thicker, my body weaker. Finally, the rope gave way. I tore free, ripping off the burning fabric, slapping out the flames on my arm. The floorboards beneath me groaned and cracked, the entire house on the verge of collapse. I lunged for the half-collapsed wardrobe, shoved it aside, revealing the hatch beneath me only escape. I dropped into the secret basement, into its cool darkness, then crawled into the narrow tunnel I had dug long ago as a last resort escape route. Behind me, the house crumbled, sending dust and embers through the passage. I clawed my way through the dirt and stone, dragging my battered body forward, until finally I reached the outside. Fresh air. I sucked in a desperate breath, stumbled to my feet, and ran. But then I stopped. I turned back, standing atop the hill, looking down at the raging inferno that was once my home. And there, standing in front of it, was a group of men. Among them, I saw him immediately, a tall man with graying temples. David, my partner, my friend. He wasn't trying to stop the fire. He wasn't trying to save me. He just stood there, shifting uneasily, watching the flames consume everything I had built. And that betrayal burned me deeper than the fire ever could. Before they could notice me, I stumbled backward, lost my footing, and plummeted down the steep ravine. Rocks and branches tore at my skin. The wind whistled past my ears. Tenitsu wotev. I crashed into the river, sinking deep as the freezing current seized me, dragging me away from the inferno of my past. I woke on a hard mattress that reeked of salt and damp wood. My head pounded. My body ached. My lips were cracked and dry. As I cracked my eyes open, I saw a low ceiling, peeling wooden walls. In the corner, a fireplace flickered weakly, giving off the faintest warmth. Where was I? You're awake? A rough voice broke through the haze. I turned my head and saw an old man, gray beard, weathered hands sitting beside me, holding a steaming mug. Where am I? I croaked. My shack, he said simply. I'm Jim, fisherman. Found you by the river this morning. Thought you were done for. You were raving in your sleep, kept saying not to call anyone, especially the cops. I tried to sit up, but a white-hot pain ripped through my body, forcing me back down. Easy, Jim grunted, setting the mug down and pressing a firm hand to my shoulder. You've got burns, bruises, and a hell of a lot of broken skin. Used to be a rescue worker back in the day, so I know what I'm doing. You'll live. I gave a weak nod, trying to gather my thoughts. No one can know I'm alive. I murmured. If they find out, it won't just be me in danger. Jim studied me for a long moment. Then he gave a slow, knowing nod. And just like that, I stayed in his shack. Weeks passed. My wounds healed, but the pain inside me didn't. I had too much time to think. Too much time to remember. I'd been a happy man once. I had a family. Marry, beautiful wife, and our daughter, Kayla. I had been a soldier, and after the service, I built a business, a real estate empire. We lived well. We traveled. We sailed on yachts, dined at the finest restaurants, and spent evenings filled with laughter and warmth. I was a good father. Kayla was my light. I taught her to ride a bike, helped her with her homework, read her bedtime stories, and Mary, we were perfect together. I thought it would last forever, but then everything changed. Mary died in a car accident. A black day, a phone call, a cold voice. I didn't believe it until I saw her. My world shattered. Kayla and I held on to each other, but the emptiness never left. I still remember that night in the kitchen when they returned her things. Kayla clutched her mother's scarf, unable to accept that she was gone. I held her close, feeling the crushing weight of grief pressing down on both of us. And then came Jessica, beautiful, smart. She brought warmth back into our home. I resisted for a long time, but Jessica made me believe in happiness again. She loved Kayla. She cared for her. She helped me piece myself back together. We laughed. We planned for the future. I thought I could be happy again. She loved Kayla, cared for her, and helped me find myself again. Together, we made plans, laughed, and talked about the future. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like happiness was something I could truly hold on to. But now, everything had changed. My home was nothing but ashes, My life had been reduced to ruins, and I had lost everything except for one thing: determination. Whoever was responsible for this would pay the price, and they would pay dearly. I often thought about how I had survived, how I had ended up in the exact spot where Jim had found me. Did they really think I could be erased so easily? I had never been weak. I was a soldier, trained to fight for my life, and now, despite the pain, despite the wounds that cover my body, I was ready to fight again. Questions kept circling in my mind, questions I needed answers to. Why hadn't they killed me? Why hadn't they finished the job right then and there? Could it be that this wasn't the end? Maybe they thought I was dead. Things could have been much worse if I hadn't woken up. Jim had become my savior, and for that, I was grateful. He kept his silence, never once prying into my past, never asking how I had ended up in the river. He didn't need to know. He was an old man, hardened by a life that had clearly been anything but easy, but in his eyes, I saw kindness. He gave me shelter, and no matter how strange it sounded, I accepted it. Here, in his rundown shack, I felt safe, even if that safety was nothing more than an illusion. The authorities wouldn't come looking for a missing man in a place like this, but I couldn't afford to leave my fate to chance. Every day, Jim brought me food. He never asked questions, never demanded explanations, just did what needed to be done. Sometimes he would tell stories of his youth, of the lives he had saved, of the storms he had endured. He was a hero, though the world would never see him as one. I listened in silence, because it was all I could listen and wait. My body was still weak, but my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do once my strength returned. Slowly, I began to recover. Jim helped me rebuild my stamina, though he had no idea that I didn't really need his help, at least not in the way he thought. I couldn't tell him the truth, couldn't reveal my plans, couldn't let him in on what was coming. Each day that passed brought me closer to taking back control. But I couldn't forget Jessica, her face, her eyes, the warmth in her voice. She had been there when everything collapsed, and maybe in some strange way, she had become part of the blurred reality I was trapped in. I often thought about how much she had meant to me, yet the more I tried to hold onto her image, the more it faded into a distant haze. I had no idea what had happened to her after the fire, but I hoped she was alive. To me, she was a symbol of everything I had lost. Time passed, and with each day, I felt more like myself. My strength was returning, my focus sharpening, but deep down, there was still an unease that refused to leave me. I knew that they wouldn't let me go. They wouldn't stop until they were sure I was dead. One cold evening, I said goodbye to Jim. I thanked him for everything he had done and promised that, when this was all over, I would repay him. I didn't know when that would be, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't stay here forever. Hiding wasn't an option. Time didn't heal wounds. It only deepened them, filling them with questions that refused to be answered. I pulled on the old coat Jim had given me and stepped out into the night, not knowing what lay ahead. The only thing I was certain of was that I had to find the truth and deliver justice before they found me again. The burned scars on my body serve as a reminder of that horrific night, each one a mark of the pain I had endured, and the memories were still so vivid that, at times, I could almost feel the fire licking at my skin. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. I had to act. I couldn't risk reaching out to my loved once it would be too dangerous for them and for me. But at the same time, I had no one left to trust. The weight of isolation pressed down on me, and with every step I took, I knew there was no turning back. That's when I remembered Bill, my old army friend. Bill was the one person who could help me, the only man who would understand without asking too many questions. He was just like Miss Simeone, who never needed things spelled out, someone who knew what needed to be done without hesitation, without fear. He was the only person left in this world I could trust. I thought back to where I might find him. There's only one place: he could beta old garage where we had spent countless hours after leaving the service. That garage had been his sanctuary, the one place where he could be himself, away from the noise, the chaos, the filth of the city. I walked toward it, feeling the crushing weight of the past on my shoulders. But I kept walking, because I knew only with his help would I be able to make my next move. Several days had passed, and finally, I stood in front of that very garage. I knocked on the door, and almost instantly, it swung open. In the doorway stood Bill, his usual stern beard and furrowed brows hiding more than he ever let on. "Stephen, are you out of your damn mind?" His voice was deep, laced with surprise and concern. "You look like you just crawled out of a war zone. What the hell happened?" I felt the weight of pain and exhaustion pressing down on every movement, but I knew I couldn't keep the truth from him. If there was anyone who could help me, it was Bill. "Bill, I need your help," I said, stepping inside. "I can't deal with this on my own. I've landed in something so deep that I might not make it out alive. And worse me, loved ones might not either." He shut the door behind me and stepped aside, motioning for me to sit down. I saw the flicker of concern in his eyes, but more than that, I saw understanding. He listened in silence as I told him everything, how I had been set up, how I had barely survived, how I had been left to burn, and how all of it was somehow connected to my business and the people I had once trusted. When I finally finished, Bill remained silent for a few moments, then met my gaze head on. "You've always been the kind of guy who handles things on his own. But if you came here, it means this is serious." He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. "Do you think the ones who stage your death are tied to your business? Or is there more to it?" I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of my own words. "I don't know for sure, Bill, but they didn't just try to kill me. They wanted it to look like an accident. They wanted no loose ends. They know how to cover their tracks, and I can't do this alone. You know, I can't go to the police. Either they won't do a damn thing, or they'll become part of the game." Bill narrowed his eyes slightly, studying my face, as if trying to gauge just how deep this ran. "Not surprised you don't want the cops involved. Hell, I don't trust them either. You know how it works, everyone's got a side, and it sure as hell isn't ours. But I might be able to help." He paused, considering something. "I got a couple of guys who might know what's really going on." Hope flickered in me, but at the same time, I knew this could pull us into something even more dangerous. "This is risky, Bill," I said, rubbing my hands against my jeans. "I can't drag you into this. You've already done enough for me." He waved me off like my words were nonsense. "Cut the crap. We've been through worse. Don't worry about me. Just tell me what you need." I hesitated for a moment, gathering my thoughts, then spoke with the certainty I had been struggling to hold on to. "I know they won't stop. I need to find them, figure out who's behind all of this. And I know you can help me find the right people to make that happen. We need to track down whoever orchestrated this and deal with them before they get another chance." Bill listened intently, then finally asked, "You want to find them and take them out?" I nodded without hesitation. "Not just take them out, Bill. I need answers. I need to know why they tried to erase me. Who gave the order? Who's pulling the strings?" Bill grabbed an old bottle of whiskey, pouring 2 glasses. "All right, we'll work together. I know where to start and who to talk to. But I'll warn you now, this isn't just about finding the truth. This could get a hell of a lot worse than you think. Are you ready for that?" I knocked back the drink in one go, setting the glass down on the table with a quiet thud. "I'm ready, Bill. We've survived before. Now we fight for the truth." He studied me for a long moment before a small, knowing smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. "And so be it. Let's get to work." When Bill found out where my daughter, Kayla, had been sent, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. A remote, high-security boarding school for troubled youth, locked away in a place designed to break kids, to strip them of hope, to bury them alive in a life they never asked for. How the hell could this happen? How could Jessica, the woman I had trusted, let this happen? She had loved Kayla, or at least, she had made me believe she did. I couldn't even begin to imagine what my daughter had been through. But one thing was certain, something wasn't right. Jessica had always cared for Kayla, but now she had abandoned her to this, locked her away in some institution like she was nothing more than an inconvenience. Had she known about this all along? Had she done this willingly? Or was she just another pawn in someone else's game? The more I thought about it, the more the questions piled up, and I was done waiting for answers. I couldn't shake off the weight crushing my soul. Every new revelation tore me apart piece by piece. How could I have been so blind, so utterly mistaken about the people I trusted? I had been certain about Jessica. We built plans together, dreamed of the future. And now what? All this time, I had been a fool, oblivious to what was happening right behind my back. Jessica had allowed this to happen, and now I didn't even know where she was. Could she have been part of the conspiracy? Or was she just another victim, like me? When I found out that David was now running the company, a cold wave of anger and bitterness crashed over me. David, the man I had once worked side by side with, my partner, my friend. How had I not seen his true intentions? I had always believed that if there was one person who wouldn't betray me, it was him. But now, his motives were clear. Didn't just want me gone. He wanted everything that was mine. The company, my position, my entire life. And maybe, deep down, he had known all along that I wouldn't survive. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. How could I have been so wrong about him? For years, we had shared victories and failures, struggles and triumphs. And yet I had failed to see that he was nothing more than an opportunist, a friend only when it served his interests. Everything I thought I knew about him now felt like a lie. I remember the nights we spent at the bar after long work days, talking about life, about the future. But it had all been a mask, hiding the cold, calculated ambition beneath. I should have felt it, sensed that something was off, but like an idiot, I ignored every warning sign. Now, I needed to pull myself together. I couldn't afford a break. My daughter was in their hands. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but there was one thing I was certain of: I would not leave her in that place. I wouldn't let David and his lackeys destroy everything I built or take Kayla away from me. Bill was there, always watching, always on guard. He knew how to move, how to act without being seen. He was right when he said that our first move had to be finding David. We had to be sure where he was, what he was doing, and who he was meeting with. But I couldn't just call him and ask. That would have been suicide. We had to be careful. We tracked him, watching his movements, studying his habits. Bill used his old connections to keep tabs on David. He was everywhere we needed him to be, yet remained invisible. We knew David had his meetings, his own circle, his carefully maintained public image. But behind it all, he lurked in the shadows. We began to understand where he went, what places he frequented. We studied him, learning every pattern, every habit. And then, finally, we found him. Dressed in his tailored suit, the usual smug smirk on his face, he looked as confident as ever. He didn't look like a man who had betrayed a friend. On the contrary, he looked like someone in control, someone thriving. I couldn't understand how he could be so calm. My eyes moved over him, searching for any sign of guilt, any crack in his facade. But there was none. He was guilty, I knew that much, but he had convinced himself otherwise. Bill, sensing the tension in my posture, gave me a silent nod. He knew I was ready. We couldn't wait any longer. We had planned this down to the last detail. That night, we followed David as he left a meeting with one of his business partners. He was in a good mood, walking down the street with an easy stride, as if he didn't have a care in the world. We moved in the shadows, tracking his every step. Eventually, David entered one of the high-end hotels where he frequently conducted his business meetings. It was the perfect moment. The second he stepped out of the hotel, we were ready. Bill and his men emerged from the darkness, swift and silent. Before David even realized what was happening, we had grabbed him and shoved him into the waiting car. There was no time for him to scream, no chance for him to fight back. Without a word, we drove him to an abandoned sawmill on the outskirts of the city, a place where no one would ever find him. By the time we dragged him out of the car, he was still in shock, completely disoriented. We threw him onto a chair and pulled a burlap sack over his head. He mumbled something, but I stood there in silence, just watching. His expensive clothes looked out of place here, in this rotting, forgotten warehouse, and I felt the weight of all those years we had spent working together turn to nothing but ashes. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a cold whisper. You really thought I wouldn't notice, didn't you? You thought I'd just disappear and never come back. You were wrong, David. He started thrashing, trying to break free, but we all knew he had no chance. We were prepared. Every question, every betrayal, every lie, I was going to get my answers tonight. I ripped the sack off his head. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and when he finally saw me, his expression froze. His pupils widened in pure disbelief. Before he could say a single word, I slammed my fist into his face. Blood splattered, and he jerked back, clutching his split lip. Stephen? He croaked, his voice shaking. Well, what the hell is this? Don't play dumb, David, I growled. You know exactly why you're here. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, avoiding my eyes. I didn't do anything. I stood before David, me friend, my traitor. The moment he opened his mouth again, no doubt to spill another lie, I slammed my fist into his face once more. My knuckles collided with his jaw with a sickening thud, splitting the skin beneath my fingers, sending a spray of blood onto the floor as he staggered back, clutching his face. Stephen, wait! I shut up. I stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar, and yanked him downward, throwing him onto a rotting wooden beam. In the same instant, I drew my knife, pressing the cold steel against his throat. He flinched. Panic flickered in his eyes. Steve, please. You don't understand. I drove the knife into his leg. Deep. I felt the blade tear through flesh, the sickening scrape of steel against bone, the way his entire body convulsed from the agony. His scream rang out, raw and desperate, as his fingers dug into my shoulder, trying to push me away. You fucking betrayed me. I twisted the blade, slow and deliberate, feeling the way his body trembled beneath me, his breath coming in ragged, shuddering gasps as warm blood soaked through his jeans, pooling onto the floor. Stephen, please. I didn't want this. They threatened my family. I froze for a moment. His family. Shit. But then, just as quickly, fury overtook me again. I wrenched the knife out, tearing through muscle and tissue, and a fresh wave of blood poured down his leg, staining the floor in dark, wet streaks. David screamed, clutching at the wound, writhing like a wounded animal. And what did you do? I spat. Sell me out? Hand me over like a fucking dog? His eyes met mine, wide, desperate, filled with the kind of fear only a man facing death could know. They knew where my wife lived, where my kids went to school. So you decided it was better for them to kill me than to find another way? He choked, his eyes welling with tears of pain, of terror. I didn't know they'd take it that far. I leaned in, pressing the knife against his cheek. You knew. You just closed your eyes. I saw the raw fear in his face. He was trembling, his back pressed against the cold steel beam, his fingers slick with his own blood as he tried in vain to stem the bleeding. But this was only the beginning. We're not done yet, David. The low mechanical whine of the sawmill filled the air, the vibrations of the old machinery rattling the floor beneath us. The scent of damp wood mixing with the metallic tang of blood. David thrashed in panic, his screams barely audible over the rising roar of the motors. But that only made them sound more desperate, more broken. Stephen. Fuck, Steve, let's talk. Please. I ignored his pleas, fastening the straps tighter around his wrists and ankles, locking him to the rusted frame of the sawmill, the very same one that had been used decades ago to slice through thick, unyielding logs, but now it was his death sentence. David thrashed, his body convulsing in pure terror as his wild, panicked eyes locked onto the slowly turning blades, the teeth glinting under the dim, flickering lights as they began their merciless, mechanical work. God, no, Stephen. Please. I'll tell you everything. I stared at him in silence, watching the sweat drip from his forehead, watching the way his fear consumed him, dragging him into something primal, something beyond reason. Your time's running out. You son of a bitch. I muttered, leaning in, my voice ice cold as I met his terrified gaze. Use it wisely. The blades crept closer, the screeching of metal against metal filling the space between his screams. David howled. It wasn't me. Not me, Stephen. Fuck. It was all Jessica. I froze. David shook violently, gasping for breath like a drowning man. She threatened me. My family. I couldn't say no, Stephen. I couldn't. She knew how to get to me. She wanted the company. She wanted everything you had. She didn't want to share. Slowly, I leaned in closer, my fingers tightening around the control lever. And Kayla? David let out a strangled breath. I saw the way his eyes widened, the way he tried to turn his head, as if he could somehow escape the question, escape me, escape his own guilt. Where is she? I growled. He whimpered, his lips trembling, his entire body quivering in helpless terror. She got rid of her. Locked her away in some godforsaken place, far from everyone. She said the girl was a problem, that she didn't need loose ends. That was it. I yanked the lever down, killing the sawmill. David sobbed, gasping for air, his entire body convulsing with relief as the spinning blades halted just millimeters from his skin. But that relief didn't last long. You made the right choice, David. He nodded frantically, already forming words of gratitude, already believing stupidly that he was going to walk away from this. I didn't give him a chance. With a single motion, I pulled the lever back up. His scream split the air. The saw roared back to life, tearing through flesh and bone in one swift, merciless motion. Blood sprayed across the room, hot and thick, as his severed right arm hit the floor with a dull, sickening thud. David's mouth gaped open in a soundless scream before his voice finally caught up, a shriek of pure agony reverberating through the empty sawmill. I bent down, picked up his severed hand, still twitching from the muscle spasms, and without a word, shoved it down the back of his shirt like a grotesque little gift. You like doing your dirty work with other people's hands, don't you, David? Here, have your own. His screams filled the hollow, decaying building. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already turning away, pulling out my phone. I needed to find Kayla, and I needed to kill Jessica. I couldn't kill David. Not yet. He was the key to Jessica, to her plans, to understanding how she had managed to deceive me so flawlessly. I locked him in the basement, leaving a guard to watch over him. He had to stay Olivia at least until I knew everything. Now, my priority was Kayla. I had to get her out of that cursed place before Jessica found out I was still alive. I orchestrated a covert operation, using old connections to extract Kayla. It was dangerous, but I couldn't risk her life. When I finally saw Kayla, my heart clenched with unbearable pain. She was a shadow of the girl I once knew. Her eyes were empty, her body frail, her arms marked with bruises and scars. They had broken her, tried to destroy her spirit. But she was my daughter, and I knew she was strong. Dad? She whispered, her voice weak and trembling. Kayla, my girl. I pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling hot tears stream down my face. It's over. You're safe now. They were horrible, Dad, she whispered, pressing herself against me. They beat us, made us work like slaves. I know, sweetheart, I murmured, stroking her hair. I know, but it's over now. You will never go back there. I took Kayla to a safe place where she could rest and recover. I hired the best doctors and psychologists to help her heal from the trauma. I promised her that everything would be okay, that I would find those who had hurt her, and they would pay for it. Now it was time to deal with Jessica. I learned that after David's disappearance, she had taken full control of the company. She was preparing to sell it, covering her tracks before she vanished. I couldn't let that happen. I devised a plan to sabotage her deal. I arranged everything so that she believed the sale was successful until the very last moment. I wanted her to feel victorious, to let her guard down, to revel in her false triumph. On the day of the signing, I watched her from a building across the street. She was dressed in her finest attire, laughing and smiling as if nothing had happened. She truly believed everything was going according to plan. When the contract was signed and the celebrations began, I made my move. I called the lead buyer and informed him that the deal had been canceled by the rightful owner of the company. Then I watched as Jessica's phone started ringing. She went pale. Her smile vanished. She tried to explain something, nervously muttering into the receiver, but I could tell they had already hung up on her. Frantically, she grabbed her phone again, attempting to call the buyer back, but it was too late. The deal was dead. What is happening? She whispered, her voice shaking. At that moment, I stepped into the conference room. Jessica turned and froze. Her eyes widened in sheer terror. Stephen? She whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. But how? I'm alive, Jessica, I said, my voice cold as ice. And I've come to take back what's mine. You can't do this, she stammered, her voice trembling. The company belongs to me. No, Jessica, I said, smirking. The company belongs to me. And now it's mine again. I stepped closer and grabbed the contract. She tried to snatch it back from me, but I was stronger. You ruined everything, Stephen, she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. You ruined everything. No, Jessica, I said, a slow smirk curling my lips. I've only just begun. I laid everything out for her, her schemes, David's betrayal, what she had done to Kayla. She denied it all, but I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew I knew the truth. You're a monster, Jessica, I said, staring at her with pure disgust. You betrayed me. You betrayed my daughter. You betrayed everyone who ever trusted you. I did it for us, she murmured, her voice quivering. I wanted us to have everything. Everything? I laughed bitterly. You took everything from me, Jessica. You stole my family, my company, my life. I saw the terror in Jessica's eyes. She was lost, completely unprepared for how this night had turned against her. But she knew that mere words would not get her out of this. She tried to maintain her proud, indifferent facade, but it was pathetic. Her entire body trembled with fear. She could feel something dark and merciless closing in on her, suffocating her, making it clear that she wasn't going to walk away from this so easily. That fear paralyzed her. Without a sound, two large men approached from behind and swiftly stuffed that lying snake into a sack before carrying her to a truck parked near the back entrance. I wasn't done with her, yet something still didn't add up. I could feel that I was missing a crucial piece, and now it was Jessica's turn to give me answers. When the sack was finally pulled from Jessica's head, she found herself in a desolate, God-forsaken placia, rotting swamp deep in the woods. Stephen, what? What are you going to do? Stephen, no, please, have mercy, please. Jessica sobbed. Mercy? On you, you wretched hag? Like the mercy you showed Kayla? Or me? You vile creature. Stephen, I'm pathetic, I know, but I'll tell you everything. You don't know everything yet. I'll tell you. She continued crying. Oh yeah? And what is it that I don't know? I wasn't alone. I had help. It was William. William Stinson is behind all of this. He's the one I was preparing to sell the business to. He orchestrated everything. I've been lying to you for so long. When you refused to sell the business to him, he came to me. We were lovers. He forced me to betray you, to set you up, to destroy you. That's how he deals with his competitors, eliminating anyone who stands in his way. And by the time I realized what I had done, it was too late, would have killed me too. The buyer under the fake name, Jack Sentel, that was actually William Stinson. It's astonishing how the cold barrel of a gun pressed against the skull and the click of a cocked hammer can make a person start talking. Jessica was no longer holding back the truth. She spilled everything, absolutely everything, because that miserable creature had no desire to rot in this swamp. William Stinson, a scavenger, a monster barely hiding beneath the mask of a man. Suddenly, everything became crystal clear. That bastard had been after my business for a long time, but I had refused to sell. So, he found another way in. Corrupt, spineless Jessica had given in to temptation. She could never have orchestrated all of this alone. I had finally uncovered the real bastard who owed me a heavy debt, and that bastard was going to pay. Jessica trembled, too afraid to even turn her head, while I stood in silence, staring at her with pure contempt. My grip on the gun remained tight, my finger gradually pressing against the trigger. A sudden series of gunshots shattered the silence. I had turned the gun away, unloading the entire magazine right beside her ear. Remember this, you worthless snake. I'm giving you something no one would ever give me in a similar situation in your life. But don't get too comfortable. Don't fool yourself into thinking you're free. From now on, I will always be your shadow. Today you live, but tomorrow or the day after, who knows? I want you to wake up every morning knowing your end could come at any moment. I can take your life whenever I choose. I will come for you, and you won't be able to do a damn thing about it because you won't even see it coming. I turned away, got into the car with my men, and left that pathetic creature alone with her thoughts. Jessica disappeared without a trace. I never heard from her again, nor did I want to. I let David go, took his family, and left far away. No matter what kind of man he was, he had a family, and I wasn't going to take a father away from his children. William Stinson. His name had become a brand burned into my mind, a symbol of betrayal and deceit. I swore he would pay for everything he had done. My plan was simple yet ruthless: break him, make him suffer, and then erase him. The first step was surveillance. I assembled a team of professionals, people who knew how to remain invisible, how to observe and gather information. We placed Stinson under round-the-clock surveillance: his home, his office, every place he visited. We tracked his phone calls, his emails, his meetings. I wanted to know everything about him, every tiny detail, every weakness, every mistake that could bring him down. At the same time, I started hunting down his foot soldiers. These men were his eyes and ears, his hands, the ones who carried out his dirty work. One by one, I pulled them from their safe little hiding spots and forced them to talk. I used every method at my disposal to break them, to extract the information I needed. Some cracked quickly, overcome with fear and panic. Others resisted, trying to protect their boss. But in the end, they all talked. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Stinson was cunning and careful, but he couldn't hide everything. I uncovered his secret deals, his illegal operations, his connections to the underworld. I learned his fears, his vulnerabilities, the skeletons in his closet. I saw how he manipulated people, how he used them and discarded them like trash once they had served their purpose. Surveillance was becoming more intense. We watched him day and night, giving him not a single moment of peace. We recorded his every step, every word, every movement. I wanted him to feel the eyes on him, to know he wasn't safe, that he could never let his guard down. And it worked. William started to crack. He noticed the shadows trailing him, and it terrified him. He tightened his security, hired more bodyguards, installed surveillance cameras, but none of it helped. He knew I was coming for him, and it was driving him insane. He became paranoid. He suspected everyone around him, trusted no one, not even those closest to him. He lived in constant fear, waiting for my strike, waiting for me to appear out of nowhere and take his life. I wanted him to suffer the same way I had suffered, to feel the same dread I felt when I lost everything. I knew he would try to run. He knew I would find him no matter where he went, so he would try to disappear, to vanish in a thin air. But I was ready. I had prepared a trap that would snap shut the moment he made his move. One night, when William was heading home after a late meeting, I sprung the ambush. We intercepted his car, disabled his security team with practiced efficiency, and left that bastard with no way out. I had calculated everything down to the last second. We dragged him out and tied him up. He was in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening, desperately trying to piece together who we were and what we wanted. "Who are you?" he shouted, thrashing against the restraints. "What do you want? Leave me alone. I'm the one who came for you." "William," I said, stepping out of the shadows. "I'm Stephen." His eyes widened in horror. He recognized Meth Man he thought was dead, the man who had returned for vengeance. You're alive?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "But how?" "I'm back, William, but don't pretend you weren't already aware of my miraculous survival," I said with a smirk. "And I've come to take back what's mine." We took him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place where I could question him without interruption, a place where no one would hear him scream. He tried to resist, but it was useless. He was mine now, and I was going to squeeze every last bit of truth out of him. "You're going to pay for everything, William," I said, looking down at him with pure hatred. "You'll pay for my family, for my company, for my life." And now William hung upside down, his legs bound tightly to an iron hook, his body slowly swaying in the emptiness of the deserted warehouse. I had found him. I had caught him. And now he belonged to me. I stood in front of him, carefully laying out my tools on the cold metal table. Knives, wire cutters, a hammer, thin surgical blades. He no longer looked so confident. His face was pale, sweat dripped from his temples, and his frantic gaze darted around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. I crouched down, meeting his eyes. "What was it you said before?" I smiled, recalling his words when he ordered Jessica to get rid of my daughter. "Business is business? Stephen, let's talk." His voice was hoarse, broken, but he was trying to hold himself together, trying to sound reasonable, to manipulate, to negotiate. I scoffed, grabbed the hammer, and drove it into his ribs with a brutal force. Crack! He screamed, his body convulsing, spinning slightly on the hook. I gave him a few seconds to process the pain before speaking again. You like pulling the strings, don't you? Making others dance while you sit back and watch them bleed? Steve, I never had anything against you. I struck again. This time his shoulder took the blow. Stinson howled, raw and desperate. No. Wait. Fuck, please. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. I set the hammer down, picked up a knife, and traced the blade along his cheek, pressing just enough for a thin line of blood to trickle down. Start talking. Jessica, he swallowed hard, his breath ragged, but I could see it was on the verge of breaking. I used her, manipulated her. She was greedy, but weak, easy to control. I listened as he choked on his fear and pain. She wanted power, she wanted control, but she didn't know how to take a tuntal. I guided her. I convinced her that you were too dangerous, that you could take everything from her, that if she didn't get rid of you first, you'd get rid of her. And Kayla? My voice was steel, cold, and sharp. Stinson shuddered. She was a problem. Jessica wanted her gone, but she didn't want murder. She just hid her away, left her somewhere no one would find her. I clenched my fists. This bastard thought he could steal my life, tear my family apart, and now he hoped that words would save him? I took a deep breath, gave myself a single second to process, then plunged the knife deep into his thigh. He screamed, thrashing wildly as blood gushed from the wound. I twisted the blade sharply, ripping through muscle. Then I yanked it out, leaving him gasping and writhing in agony. Setting the knife aside, I reached for the wire cutters. Stinson tensed, his breath ragged, his entire body trembling as he realized what was coming next. You know, William, I murmured, gripping one of his fingers, I need to make sure you'll never be able to break another person again. He shook his head violently, whimpering. No, Stephen, please don't do this. Snap! A blood-curdling scream filled the warehouse. His severed finger hit the floor with a dull thud. But I wasn't done yet. I reached for the next one. Stinson sobbed, choking on his own breath, begging, struggling against the restraints, but they held firm. Snap! Another finger gone. His screams tore through the air, raw and agonizing, his entire body convulsing as if his soul was being ripped from him. He gasped for air, his mind frantically searching for any possible salvation, but there was none. I tossed the wire cutters aside, stepped back to the table, and picked up the soldering iron. Stinson trembled even harder. No, please. Stephen, please, let's just end this, I beg you. Not yet. I switched on the iron, watching as the metal heated, glowing a brilliant orange. And when it was scorching hot, I pressed it firmly against his shoulder. The stench of burning flesh filled the air. Stinson arched his back, his scream no longer human shrill, hysterical, piercing. I savored the sound. He begged, sobbed, writhed, but I held him there, pressing down, searing him, until his skin sizzled and blackened. By the time I let go, he was nothing more than a helpless, broken mass of pain and fear. I leaned in closer, peering into his agony-filled eyes. You took too much from me, William. Please, he rasped, wheezed, choked. I don't believe in forgiveness. You're a monster, William, I said, gazing at him with nothing but disgust. You destroyed my life, and now I will destroy yours. No, I won't kill you, not yet. That would be too easy. I find it far more satisfying to watch as your pathetic life crumbles before your eyes. You will live, but you will not enjoy it. I promise you that. You will feel everything you put me through. I didn't kill him then. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the pain he had inflicted upon me. I wanted him to live in fear, knowing I could end his life at any moment. I let him live, but his life was already over. He lost everything: his company, his connections, his reputation. He became a shadow of himself, a man who lived in constant terror. But I knew he would try. William Stinson could never stop, even when he had nothing left. No money, no power, no allies. I had stripped him of everything, left him destitute, pathetic nothing. But the bastard still tried to come after me. He gathered a gang of degenerates like himself, stockpiled weapons, clinging to the delusion that he could reclaim even a fraction of what I had taken from him. But I was always one step ahead. That's why he was sitting in front of me once more, bound to a chair, his face bloodied, his hands trembling, his forehead slick with sweat. He knew this was the end. I paced slowly around the room, letting the silence settle in, letting him feel it before I spoke. "You're so stupid, William. So predictable." He coughed, spat blood, gave me a crooked, defiant grin. "You think you've won, don't you? Think you got away with it?" "I don't think, William. I know." He struggled against the straps, cursed under his breath, trying to muster some semblance of confidence, but I could see him shaking. "You could have just left me alone, Stephen. This isn't me. It was Jessica. She started all of this." I laughed. "Really? You're still blaming her? She was just a tool in your hands. You manipulated her, threatened her, fed her empty promises, and when she was no longer useful, you would have thrown her away, just like everyone else. That's what you do, William. But not this time." He shook his head, his face twisting in a pained grimace. "Stephen, listen to me. You don't understand what you're doing. We can make a deal." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not going to kill you, William." For a fleeting moment, his eyes flickered with hope. It didn't last long. I turned toward the door and gave a small nod. 3 men stepped inside, tall, silent, dressed in black. Their expressions left no room for doubt. They weren't here to negotiate. Stinson went pale. He knew them. "Oh, shit. No. Stephen, you can't. I shrugged. "I can, and I am." One of the men stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Stinson's shoulder, squeezing hard enough that his knuckles turned white. "Been a long time, Willie." His voice was low, hoarse, dripping with venom. "Thought you could hide, huh? Thought we'd forget? Please, guys, let's talk." His voice cracked into a pitiful whimper. He started thrashing, desperate, but I just stood there and watched. "Oh, we'll talk," the second man chuckled, motioning to someone outside. A bark rang out. Stinson froze. A deep, guttural growl followed. I saw it then, a pure, unfiltered terror distorting his face. "Stephen, God, please don't do this." I leaned in, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You always loved controlling people, didn't you? Loved the way your words could make them tremble? For the first time in your life, you're going to feel that for yourself." I turned and walked away. Behind me, the men unfastened his restraints and dragged him toward the exit. He screamed, No, please. Not like this. Not like this." They didn't listen. They dragged him out to the backyard, where a cage sat waiting inside, 2 massive dogs, starved, vicious, trained to kill. I stopped a few meters away, arms crossed, watching. One of the men gave a nod. The cage door swung open. William screamed, jerked, tried to run, but the first bite sank deep into his thigh. The sound of tearing tendons cracked through the air. His shrieks were deafening. The second beast latched onto his shoulder, yanked, hurled him to the dirt. They tore into him, ripping, thrashing, devouring him piece by piece. I didn't look away. They didn't kill him immediately. They savored it, tearing, gnawing, feasting while he sobbed, convulsed, begged. "Aowa! Help! God, help me!" A sickening crunch. One of the dogs ripped a chunk from his arm. He choked on his own screams, his body writhing in the dirt. They were eating him alive, piece by piece, gnawing, shredding, consuming. And all I did was watch. Stinson was no longer a man, just meat, a feast for beasts. At some point, his body convulsed one last time, then went still. "Well, that's that." One of the men looked at me, giving a satisfied nod. I said nothing. I simply turned and walked away, leaving the remains of William Stinson to the jaws of his own greed. After William Stinson was eliminated, my life slowly began to return to normal. Yet, I understood that the past had left deep wounds that would never fully heal. My main priority now was to create a safe and happy future for Kayla. We moved into a spacious house in a quiet suburb, where the fresh air and tranquility contributed to her recovery. I hired a team of experienced psychologists and therapists to help Kayla cope with the trauma she had endured. I made every effort to spend as much time with her as possible, listening to her stories, encouraging her interests, and helping her regain her confidence. The company I had reclaimed became more than just a source of income. It was a symbol of restoration. I reorganized it, ensuring greater transparency and accountability. I hired trustworthy individuals, people I knew I could rely on, and implemented a system designed to minimize the risk of future betrayals. One day, Sarah entered our lives. She was Kayla's new psychologist, a young woman with soft features, piercing green eyes, and a soothing voice. She possessed a rare gift of empathy, an innate ability to understand and deeply feel the emotions of others. From the moment I met her, I knew Sarah was special. She was not only an exceptional professional, but also a kind-hearted person with a genuine desire to help. She quickly formed a bond with Kayla, earning her trust and becoming more than just a therapist. She became a friend. Sarah often visited our home, spending time with both Kayla and me. We took walks in the park, played board games, and watched movies together. She shared stories from her own life, opening up about her thoughts and emotions. She taught Kayla how to manage negative feelings, build self-confidence, and form healthy relationships with others. I watched as Sarah cared for Kayla, and my heart swelled with gratitude. I saw how Kayla thrived under her guidance, becoming more open, more joyful. I realized that Sarah was not just a great specialist, she was an extraordinary person who brought light and warmth into our lives. As time passed, Sarah and I found ourselves spending more and more time together. We discovered that we shared many interests and values. We could talk for hours about anything, understanding each other without the need for words. One evening, as we sat on the terrace watching the sunset, I suddenly realized I had fallen in love with her. I no longer saw just a remarkable woman in Sarah. I saw a partner, someone who shared my vision for life, someone I could trust to stand by me through both joy and hardship. I confessed my feelings to Sarah, and she reciprocated them. We began seeing each other, growing closer, learning more about one another with each passing day. She became an inseparable part of our family, filling our home with love and support. Kayla was happy to see me happy again. She grew to love Sarah like a second mother, grateful for everything she had done to help her overcome the darkness of her past. Sarah and I decided to build a new family together, one founded on love, trust, and understanding. We envisioned a future filled with adventures, family celebrations, and cozy evenings by the fireplace. We knew that life would not always be easy, but we were ready to face any challenge together. We believed that our love and support would be enough to create a bright and happy future for ourselves and for Kayla. And so, we began planning our wedding, a quiet, intimate ceremony surrounded by our closest loved ones. We wanted that day to mark a new beginning, the first chapter of a life filled with love, healing, and true happiness.